everyone, so great to have you join us today. Before we start the official podcast, we're just going to do a quick sound check. So if everybody can hear my voice clearly, can you just maybe throw a quick thumbs up in the chat or give us a thumbs up on the screen so we can see that we're good to go? Yep. All right, well, Todd, are we good to go? Perfect. Listen, this is a treat today. This podcast is an opportunity for me to share the amazing people that I get the opportunity to speak with every day, share it with all of you and our listeners. This podcast is called The Curious Investor. It has been born from my genuine excitement in learning from other people. Great people that I get the opportunity to do business with or learn from or actually be in business with, both in business for a while and in this case today, actually in business with someone who is relatively new to me. So without further ado, I would like to introduce myself. I am Nicole Tanner. I am the team lead for the Reed James Commercial Real Estate team. I also lead the division, the commercial division at Keller Williams Energy, which is part of a group of 3 brokerages, Keller Williams brokerages. And relatively new to our ownership group at Keller Williams Energy is Tom Mitchell. Tom has an incredible background in real estate. We're going to learn a lot more about it today. And we're going to talk today specifically about something that has come up really almost daily in my business, and I'm sure on a very regular basis in your business as well. We get it amongst each other. We get it from our clients. It's on the topic of a shifting market. So what does that mean? It's something that we've anticipated, we've feared, we're maybe speculating about it. It feels like it's been top of mind. It's been in the conversation for what feels like forever. And if this isn't something that you've lived through, well, we're joined today by someone who has lived through this, survived, and even prevailed through it, but not before learning some really important lessons along the way from that experience. So first, let me introduce you to Tom Mitchell. We're very grateful to have you join us today. You are a part of the ownership group at the brokerage, but your experience really goes well beyond that. So I think the best place to begin is if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background? Tell us how you got started in real estate, all the way up to what you do today.
Oh, thank you very much. My wife Diane and I, by the way, she's the owner of the company, okay, not me. Okay, so I'm just a sidekick. But at the end of the day, it's really been quite a journey. A background is banking and did credit and banking, and getting into real estate through Diane's encouragement. Pretty comfortable in the banking system, and the best move we ever made. We were real estate investors prior to getting into real estate. And so what happened is, along with what Diane had been building up in the 6 months prior to me being in the business, she would create clientele along with some investor clients that wanted to get involved. And that's how a lot of our business was generated in the first 2 or 3 years. All word of mouth, referrals, and whatever. Because we were real estate investors, people want to know how to do it. And so it was a walk in the park, the first little bit of being in the business, because it was just a natural selling 40, 50 homes a year, people putting their hands up saying, how do we do it? How can we get involved in it? And then 1989 hit, and fa-voom, 1990.
So those days when you started, how long ago was that?
Lost track, 30 some odd years ago. And
so it's been a minute.
Yeah. And that's when our shift started. And that's when I say that as much as it was a painful process, because we were real estate investors at the time, and went through some punishing, not only on the real estate sales side of things, but real estate investment side of things. it was a wake-up call to do some retuning, refocusing on how we do business.
So your experience is really not only from running a real estate business and what impact that had on that, but also from a holding real estate from an investment perspective as well. Okay, so I guess we'll go back to that. And I think, you know, the best predictor of future behavior is to look at what's happened in the past and learn from that. So from your perspective, tell us, what do you think are some of the attributes of a shifting market? And what indicators do you see that confirm that we're in one now?
You know, it's interesting. I still remember distinctly what 1989, 1990 was like. And it's a long time ago, and you would think it would go away, and it hasn't. But it was one of the best things that happened to us, even though it was very painful, because it allowed us to retool and refocus on how we do business. Understanding about lead generating, understanding about you know, scheduling your time to make sure it was highest and most effective way to do things. And, you know, getting more and more educated over the real estate world. And at that time, we weren't involved with Keller Williams. We had to go elsewhere to do it. So Diane and I would travel all over North America to find mentors to help us understand how we could be better realtors.
So can you paint the picture for me a little bit? So you had a real estate business. I'm sure you were well beyond doing the 40 to 50. Or maybe you weren't, like what was the, like in terms of the number of transactions that you were approximately doing at that time going into that shift, but as well on the investment holding standpoint, like what was your situation at that time? So going into that shift personally.
Like I said, Diane and I were real estate investors, and I think we owned about 25 properties at that time. We were in our early 30s. Duplexes, triplexes, probably the worst thing you own when you have a market that goes upside down, because nobody wants to buy investment properties. They'll buy a single family home, but not a commercial type unit. It really goes flat in a market like that we went through. And a lot of our business was that environment of people wanting to try to understand, you know, how to get involved in it. They were intimidated. And we had one other thing that was, you don't see anymore, because not sure it was the government or who put it on, but you weren't allowed to flip properties anymore. So we were doing 2 or 3 transactions prior to closing after somebody bought it within a 3-month period. So for example, you'd buy a property, you'd tell another potential investor that, hey, I have a client who bought this particular property, and she said, you know, I'll pay him X for it. And you go back to your original buyer who you sold the investment property to, and say, look, I can make you $25,000 on this, $50,000. You interested? And you don't even have to close. You can be involved in, and you would do 2 or 3 transactions within a 3-month period on the same property.
Yeah,
it was a really interesting time.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they put a nix to it, because it was what catapulted the marketplace to be as bad as it got, along with increasing interest rates, what we're experiencing now. But at the time, we didn't really see that. And it was an exciting time to make a lot of people a lot of money, because they were taking us up on, you know, to flip something before they even close it.
Yeah. So you come in with a thriving real estate business. You've got about 25 investment properties when 1989 hits, and then what happens?
It just started to slow down. It really started to go, the calls weren't coming in. We weren't doing the number of deals that we would normally do, and thinking, uh-oh. And we had our real estate properties, you know, remember I told you about the flipping of properties. So that would also happen with new home sites. So in our town, Newmarket, people would buy, you know, have a 3,000 square foot house that they were trying to survive, because they were actually one of the few people that closed on their property they were planning on flipping. And they were renting out a 3,000 square foot house at that time for $1,000. I was renting out a 2-bedroom duplex, you know, part of that duplex for $750. So our vacancy rent went through the roof, because they were all moving over to these flip properties.
Yeah, bigger houses.
Not much difference in price.
Yeah, exactly. So what were some of the key factors from your perspective that contributed to exposure in that market? And then what happened as a result?
Well, for us, it was one of those things where it really made us realize that we got to dig deep and start getting really focused on what we're doing here. The phone call naturally coming in wasn't going to happen anymore. So, along with our units getting vacated, which was really unusual, normally in a declining market, and you'll see this now, the US experienced it, and there people need to rent a place. They either lost their house and it became a high rental market. This was a little different because all these new homes that hadn't been closed yet were closing, and they were having a place to go. So it created a real flood of potential rental properties on the market that normally wouldn't have been there. So it caused our vacancy rate to go way up. And so at the end of the time, we knew that to sustain this, we had to get down and get dirty and start to get serious what we're doing. And that's when we started traveling over North America to get different mentors like a Mike Ferry or a Howard Britton at the time to understand what it was all about. And that's when I got introduced about lead generating.
And that's a really interesting comment from my perspective, because I think the primal instinct might be to hunker down. And what I hear you saying by sharing your experience is that you doubled down, but you actually continue to invest in your professional development, which I feel like would be a little bit counterintuitive, because this stuff is happening and you've got a family at the time. Was that difficult to lean in and make
a young family too? So it was really challenging. Diane and I are very education-based type, always wanting to expand and grow, especially that was one of Diane's real strengths. So she got us to learn more and do things, but I'm a pretty simple guy. So it was about getting out there and learning ways to be proactive with our business rather than reactive. And that's what introduced me to lead generating and door knocking and all that stuff that was terrible, painful, but it retooled and refocused our business to allow us to expand. And thank goodness, looking back, because unlike what happened in 2017 around here, it was only 1 year blip. 1989 didn't really come out of it till 1996, 97, and it really didn't see the real growth start to happen until like 10 years later. So for the first 4 or 5, 6 years, we were going 2 steps forward and 3 steps back.
Yeah. I mean, from a coaching perspective, I mean, what I hear you saying is that there were some key mentors and coaches that really helped you to guide you through that process, which I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, like, how would they even know how to navigate this with you if so much about it didn't look like other shifts? So that's interesting from my perspective. But when you're going through this and you reach what looking back would be the bottom, so you're reacting and you're dealing with it, and then you reach what's left. How do you build yourself back from that? Like, how do you, coaches, I know you mentioned coaches, but just now you're dealing with a lot of investment properties that you're holding on to, you're dealing with vacancies. I mean, is it just focusing on being brilliant at the basics, lead gen, hunkering down, or is there strategically some other advice that you could offer as well?
It really became really important, and we were like the typical agent getting into it because we had natural business coming in because of our investing experience. The phone would ring and it would be there. So we really went from a business structure being banking into a free-for-all kind of real estate career that selling 40 or 50 homes with our eyes closed. And no real structure was required. Because we were in business, we understood leverage. We had an assistant well before assistants were really part of the everyday word. We were leveraged from that standpoint, but really we had a bit of a free-for-all kind of attitude because business was coming in quite plentiful. The understanding that we were in a shift and understanding that we had to start getting laser focused on what we do. Scheduled properly the way they need to be scheduled for lead generating, and picking up on that we got to allocate a certain amount of time every day to make sure we lead generate on a daily basis. And the interesting thing is that we had some of our better years in the middle of all the shifting.
Now, I feel like you've answered this question already, but I'm still going to ask it in case there's anything that we've missed. Looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently going through that?
I'd love to say, I wish we never had to experience it, but I think it really catapulted us to move to another level in another shape or form of failing forward.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm thinking exactly that. I mean, when you are in a market that is so forgiving and accommodating, you're maybe not running the business that you should be running to get to levels that you can't even really think about. And so I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm thinking that that's exactly what it did for you. That laser focus probably set you up to then take the business post shift to an even higher level.
Absolutely. That was the beauty of it, is it did that. And you know, back in those days, as much as I tell you about owning all this real estate, was becoming devastating because our places were becoming vacant, never so much turnover, never so much damage being done to properties that never experienced in the 4 years or 10 years prior to all this building up of these properties, that it was getting quite costly on a monthly basis for us to carry on and do what we had to do. And we didn't come from affluent families, Diane and I, you know, very modest means. So there was nobody to fall back on to be able to get any financial help. It was all about what we do. And we had a young family. So it was a very stressful time.
I mean, I'm going to go off script a little bit here and share a personal experience, because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about my own dad, actually, who was very involved in investing in real estate, just locally, just, you know, always saw the bigger picture. And he often spoke about going through periods where there was more than double-digit interest rates. And banking was shifting from having personal bankers to kind of going more corporate and having to navigate that. And I listened to you, and after listening to him, just the fortitude that it takes to stay the course and believe that ultimately big picture real estate will deliver for you, and to stay the course on that. I knock on wood. I've been really blessed and fortunate in real estate. And I know, you know, you can't work and live in this business without going through the peaks and valleys that naturally come with it. But I really respect, and I was brought up watching just that kind of fortitude that it requires to dig in, hunker down, but stay the course in what you believe you're doing.
And I'll just add, so what that created as we moved on and got into staying focused with lead generating and understanding how all that is important on everyday part of business. You know, it's our best year in real estate. I think we sold 250 houses and then sold almost 4,000 houses in our real estate career. So it really opened the door to really making things happen that it wouldn't have happened if we didn't have to experience those painful times.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the question that's on a lot of people's minds going into what we perceive to be a shift afoot right now is, you know, having gone through it, what insights can you offer to our listeners regarding how to protect their investments?
You know what? Let's talk about real estate person, the real estate salesperson. First of all, don't be afraid. There's always someone who needs to buy and sell. You need to bump up your lead generating time to increase it, because it's going to be longer time to find those people, but there's always a need for that to happen. It may slow down, but there's always a need for that. There's always someone who needs to buy and sell. So don't lose that faith that it's just coming to a total stop. It doesn't happen that way. Okay. And the more you lead generate, the more leads you have, the more potential you have. And you're looking for motivated buyers and sellers through that process.
Yeah, so this podcast obviously reaches a lot of our colleagues in real estate, but it also reaches real estate investors who will be asking the same questions. So what advice do you offer from a real estate investment perspective, and how to protect your investment business going into surviving and thriving through a shift?
Well, the one thing we learned that we got painfully hurt from was in 1989. Prior to that, in the latter couple of years, I told you about the number of properties we owned, but we got into bigger developments with partners, and that was a big problem. We weren't properly set up on those partnership relationships, and that's really what kind of broke the camel's back for Diane and I. Those 20, believe it or not, those 23, 25 properties for just Diane and I without partners were still okay, even though we were experiencing vacancies. It was the partnership part of things. So I would say if you're getting involved with partners when you're acquiring any real estate, make sure you get legal counsel to make sure you're properly set up on that. As far as sustaining it, like I said, there's no flipping allowed. So the real estate market, the rental market will always be strong. It will be strong. There's a need. We have so much immigration coming in. You don't have to worry about that as much. Just make sure your properties are kept well and kept high quality. You'll have very strong tenants as a result of that. And if you just look at what happened in the US during the crash that happened there, the rental market was amazing because people couldn't afford to keep the house they lived in. So don't worry about that. And you're going to get through this in 5 years, 10 years from now, you're going to look back and this house is, your investment you own is still going to be worth more money than it was today.
Yeah, I mean, so I have to stop and ask about the partnership piece of it, because, you know, is there anything that you can offer in terms of like, you know, what are the, if you have partners in real estate is something that happens all the time, or groups coming together to invest in real estate. So you can take on stuff that you couldn't otherwise do by yourself. I guess just high level, is there anything that you can offer and, you know, get legal counsel? We acknowledge that you're not a lawyer. But any you know, key strategies?
Yeah, there is a couple of things actually that Diane and I made a big mistake with in the late 80s. First of all, just from the stuff we owned, Diane and I just bought it together, thinking nothing of what if. So there was nothing divided or split up, and we've since corrected all that. But it's like we all joined it; it was all together, so it was one big pile of stuff. You get into, so no, and not that you know, if you only own 3 or 4, you know, owning it personally is something there's no need to own it under a company name at that level. But you know, you don't have to own it with your spouse. Segregate it between your spouse and you. And the bank always wants to get you to both sign. You don't need to do that in most cases. Just get one person to sign. And don't let them lure you into just automatically doing both. When you get involved in a partnership with other people, which, you know, the price of real estate in today's market probably creates a little bit more of that, make sure you do the same thing. Keep things segregated, have a partnership agreement drawn up to help protect the what ifs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't overexpand. Keep within your means.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you on that. And I think also that having that team in place, we've touched on this in other episodes in this podcast, really important to have a team around you of lawyers, accountants, advisors that you trust and are tried and true over time for you. So, I mean, should buyers continue to buy through a shift? Should sellers continue to sell through a shift? What are your thoughts around that?
We don't make that decision. The public does. Yes, you have marriage split-ups, relocations, deaths. You have people that want to buy. You should be buying when other people are selling. So, and people, the smart investor will see that. So there's always that kind of activity going in the market. Maybe not as much of it, but there's always people that need it. And that's the key. You don't want to be wasting your time with the guy who's just testing the market. You want to be going after the guy that's totally motivated to make it happen.
And what are your thoughts on investing in real estate through a shift?
Beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Nobody knows when the bottom is. Nobody can predict it as much knowledge as we have. We can never predict when the bottom or the top is. Buying and holding real estate for the long term, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, very good.
And as painful as we went through in 1989, it just encourages to realize that it's about holding power, it's about sustaining long-term investment. This flipping, it really gets glorified in HD TV and all that. Sounds nice, but that shouldn't be your primary goal. Your primary goal should be buying and holding.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, what are the indicators that we look for to determine from your perspective how long a shifting market is going to last? And going into this one, any thoughts on how long you think this shifting market could last?
My gut, nobody knows for sure. My gut feeling would be, a year, 2 years for what's going to happen now. In 2017, I was in the thick of the market and I thought, okay, here we go, 1989 all over again. Because up until then, we never really experienced that much. We had a pretty steady market. And fortunately, in 2017, it only lasted about a year or 18 months. Like it really, we came out of it pretty nicely. I think this one might be a little bit more painful because the banks really charge increasing rates to help slow down inflation. So when you have that happening, it does put a pause in investors and what's going to happen. But I really think that the government knows better this time than they did last time. And by the way, I was in the bank when you were talking about 18% rates. We couldn't believe it. I was in credit. We couldn't believe it. This is before computers were really the online thing to do. They'd hand us these manuals to calculate what mortgage payments and what, loan payments would be. And it turned into some small little folder into like a Sears catalog. You may not remember what a Sears catalog looks like, but think of the big, thickest catalog you can find. And they had rates going up to 40%. We kept thinking, oh my God, what's it going to go to? And the economists, they said, oh yeah, this is the top. At 14%, it'd go to 16%. So the economists couldn't even get it right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember these stories from my dad actually talking about it and going in and just begging to pay interest-only payments to keep up. And yeah, it was revolutionary from his perspective, and it changed the way he invested in real estate as well. And I think as spectators, growing up around this, you just kind of gotta you gotta watch and learn from those who've gone before you to best prepare yourself. But we have a lot of real estate agents listening and learning from this discussion. So I think it's really important to talk about from a mindset perspective. We're here to support and do the best by our clients that we can. How can we best support our clients? And how should we be supporting them and coaching them through their real estate investing or home purchases or sales?
The real estate agents, I think they really need to get laser focused. If they haven't got a schedule set up, which they should have, make sure they have a schedule and be prepared that if you've been doing an hour of lead generation or no lead generation, you have to increase how much lead generating you're doing. Because like I said at the beginning, it's about finding those buyers and sellers that are most motivated to move. And it's not going to be like it was before. You have to increase your activities to make all that happen. But you have to be scheduled, and it can't be a free-for-all to allow you the time to do that.
So if I'm a buyer and I want to buy or I'm tempted to invest in real estate and I'm meeting with you to help me, to talk to me about that, what kind of language do you use when you're talking to somebody who's thinking about making an investment or a purchase, and there could be some skepticism or some doubt in their mind? If anybody would ever say to me, what's the market like? Good, bad, or indifferent? Market's always great. Okay. So that was one thing. It's about your mindset. And if you're not surrounding yourself in that 6-foot circle with people that have a positive attitude, you're hanging around the wrong people. So that's the thing. Believing in real estate, believing in what you're doing is really a necessity to life, next to water and food. You're doing something good for them. That's what your motivation needs to be about, tapping into their wants and needs, about picking up what they're thinking of doing and helping them focus through or journey through that whole buying process. Because nobody can predict what tomorrow will bring or what a month will bring. But
we do know that investing and owning real estate, whether it's something to live in as a necessity or as an investment, long-term is one of the best things you can invest in, if not the best in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. 10 years in, every real estate purchase looks genius.
Yeah.
Looks good. So I guess, bottom line, what are the top 3 things that you should be doing either as a real estate professional or as an investor to prepare for a shifting market?
As a real estate agent, one, don't get scared. There's, like I told you, there's buyers and sellers that need to move. There always will be. Get laser focused. Put your game hat on. If you don't have a schedule, get your schedule. Get it set up. And lead generate your brains up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's amazing. We talked about we've covered a lot of ground today, and I think it's really interesting and top of mind. And in fact, timeless. There's a lot of lessons in here that transcend any one shift in market or any one time in the market that I hear from you today. So I really appreciate you sharing your story, your insight, your personal perspective, and some really personal pieces of information along the way. I think we can all learn from that, and I'm very grateful that you've done that with us today. Is there anything else that you feel should be mentioned from the perspective of learning for anybody who might be joining us today? Anything that we haven't touched on that you feel should be highlighted?
This is more of a corporate process that I'm going to say, is that I wish in 1989 we had Keller Williams to even think about. We had to travel all over to go and get this kind of education and knowledge. And that's what made it so easy for Diane and I to make the shift from the company we were at for 22 years into Keller Williams, is because it's education based and it's all encompassing in one company. And if that was around in the late 80s when we were going through what we were, it might help. It wouldn't have totally eliminated the pain, but it would have made it a lot easier to get better educated, to understand what we need to understand about being a better realtor.
No, I agree with you. I mean, we operate at an amazing brokerage and company that provides so much in terms of education and support and coaching and mentorship. And I mean, even just reaching out to the investors who may be listening to this podcast, make sure part of your team is somebody who has those kind of resources available to them. So if you're an investor, working with an agent who not only has this kind of experience themselves and this kind of strong confidence and knowledge, but has access to so much more beyond them. And certainly Keller Williams is a shining example of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So we're just going to take a small pause right now. We've got a couple of questions coming in from our audience that we just want to collect here. So just give me 1 second and we'll see what those questions are. All right, let's see what we have here. Okay, so this is what we will affectionately call the hot seat, because I'm reading it for the first time as well. Okay. Tell us a story from your door knocking experiences during that shift, and how did the conversation change?
It's interesting. First of all, getting out there and door knocking, there was a feeling when I first started doing it, there was a feeling of that I'm nothing more than a glorified mailman, because I'm just going from door to door. But the beauty of it all was I started to realize that there's a bunch of people out there that, even though the market's terrible, that do want to buy and sell. And they were actually pretty friendly. And at first I was a little nervous about getting out there and doing it, because I thought everybody was going to be rude and obnoxious and whatever.
Do you have a specific story that comes to mind?
I got lots of stories. We haven't got enough time to tell you all the stories. But the bottom line is, there's a bunch of people out there, good markets, bad markets, that want to sell. And if you just go to them with your proper script and dialogue, and it's a very simple script and dialogue, to ask them the proper questions, you'll dig them up. it's really that simple. But a cute story will be something I had was someone who I saw it, he kind of, I cut across his lawn because my attitude was, well, I'm going to knock on so many doors a day. I got to cut across the lawn and I'll roll with the punches, and every now and then might get someone who's upset. Well, at the end of the day, the guy didn't want to be added to any database or had no interest in selling, and he was really rude to me at the door. And I started cutting across his lawn. He goes, and by the way, you're cutting across my lawn. And I didn't think anything of it. I said, I just apologized. I said, I'm sorry, even though I always did it. I just apologized. I said, I'm sorry, and went on to the next property. Well, sure enough, 6 months later, he called my assistant and wanted to book an appointment. He goes, tell him the guy that was really rude and mean to him at the door there because he cut across my lawn. I didn't really remember who that was. I get up to the property 6 months later, and I realized who it was. And sure enough, he not only listed his property with me, we sold him another house, and then his family member bought another house off of it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think we've all got stories, maybe something similar to that, but the addressing your mindset, like what you go in with these preconceived notions of what you think could happen, and lots of times it's like worst case scenario, and then you're pleasantly surprised as to, you know, the things that prevent you from doing the things that you should be doing don't necessarily happen. So that mindset piece of it is really important. So number 2 question, how did you learn to be laser focused, to stay super disciplined in your lead gen the way you did as the wheels fell off the market?
Actually, it was pretty easy because we had, like I said earlier, we had nobody to rely on financially, and we had a young family, and it was like do or die. So that was easy. The laser focus, I've always been a person, I played competitive sports, hockey when I was young, and that never say die attitude, and Diane's got that same attitude as I do, you know, like we're in it together and we're going to make the best of it. And not scared of a little bit of work, as Diane would like to always say. But, you know, it was one of those things where creating a little bit of agenda by working on how many doors I'm going to knock on a day and how much time I'm going to spend doing, that's all part of the schedule. The schedule was always easy to make up for me. And it wasn't about learning, it was realizing the importance of it. That was important, that allowed me to stay laser focused on keeping it, because without a schedule, whoever calls you first is creating your schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I remember I had a manager once say to me, plan the work and work the plan. And it's always stuck. So what are the opportunities you see in this shift, and what do you think makes this one different from others?
I don't know about the different part of it. The shift is a shift, and it goes up or it goes down. So I don't know about anything different. Other than a lot of this, what you're seeing now is government controlled, but we never had experienced COVID before either. And unfortunately, in Ontario, we've got a lot more restrictions than we have in other parts of the world. So that's another topic for another discussion. When we spend 6 months in Florida, we get to see what the other world's like. But anyways, I will say that, you know, it's about endurance. It's about realizing you've got to get out there and go above and beyond what you would normally do to generate more leads and more business.
Yeah. And then we have a question here about, can we talk about cutting non-critical expenses to zero?
Actually, I'm glad someone mentioned that, because you're always going to have expenses. And for those of you that don't have an assistant, you should be thinking about getting an assistant, because if you don't have an assistant, you're the chief cook and bottle washer. That was the one thing that I think I mentioned earlier that Diane and I both agreed on, and Diane had an assistant before there was assistants even in the real estate world, because we understood the importance of leverage. And if we didn't have one, we were doing all the things that we either shouldn't be doing or didn't want to do to prevent us from doing the most important thing, and that is lead generating.
Yeah. And I have a question here, and this will be, I'm cognizant of your time, but we have one question that's, I think, a great question that I want to make sure we ask. What would you tell buyers that purchased in February of 2022 for 1.8 million and watching a house that sold next door now for 1.5 million, especially for homes that are very similar or even superior?
It's a long-term investment. We've experienced that in 1989. We experienced it in 2017. It's a long-term investment. And as long as you're prepared to buy and hold, nobody can time the market.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. This is where this is what we do just before we end the podcast, is we want to get to know you a little bit better, not just from a real estate perspective, but from who Tom Mitchell is perspective. So this is what we like to call rapid fire. You don't know what these questions are, so this is top of mind. What is the achievement that you are most proud of?
That I married my wife. She's
Great
my pillar
answer.
that got me to the next level. Always been a steady Eddie guy, but she always was able to motivate me and she does this very well with a lot of people, to help them understand the better things that they're capable of doing, other than the same old, same old.
And so how long have you been married for?
Actually, we just talked about that the other day. We dated for 8 years. We're high school sweethearts. And Diane says, "Why did it take you so long to ask me to marry?" I said, "Well, we wanted to make sure it was the right." So we dated for 8 years, and we did 40 years in May of this year.
Wow, that's
So a total of 48 years that we've been together.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Never look back.
No, when you have the right partner, I hear what you're saying in terms of them challenging you to be better than you are, right? Both in business and at home, actually. So, I mean, you seem like a pretty driven guy, laser focused. We've talked about that. What is a goal or a dream that you have yet to achieve? Is there anything?
I want to travel the world more. It's funny, we own a lot of real estate, and every now and then someone says, "Well, why don't you sell a few of these properties at the peak?" Well, I'm semi-retired now, and it's a hobby. It's a kind of a fun thing, we still have an assistant who works for us, even though we go to Florida for 6 months of the year, which is fantastic. But it's kind of like dealing with the different situation. We have a property manager. It's inspiring to do it. Diane's still active with Jamie Lee, who runs the offices we have. She's still active with her and giving her sounding board advice over what should be done and whatever. But it's what keeps us young and motivated to keep going for another 2 decades or 3 decades, whatever we can handle.
Yeah, I know it sounds cliche, but when it's a passion, it's not a job.
No.
And I think that's one of the beauties of real estate, is that you can always stay involved to whatever degree you want.
It's a beautiful thing. It's one of the best businesses we ever got involved in, both on the realtor side of it, along with the investor side of it.
Okay, and I have to ask, when you're not thinking about real estate, what's your guilty pleasure? What do you like to do?
I've never been a big stock market person, but my son introduced the Tesla in the stock market about 3 years ago. And now I'm an avid CNBC watcher, investor, over and above. It's kind of cool.
Very good. Okay, we have one last question that's going to get squeezed in here. What was your daily schedule as an active real estate agent? Oh, that's from your daughter, Jamie Lee.
Jamie, you know what it is.
I think she wants everyone else to know.
So the daily schedule was.
Oh, sorry, I need to qualify. As an active real estate agent with a team.
Yeah. It was always lead generating. I mean, I did both cold phones and door knocking, and door knocking was something that was always the number one thing that had to be done by not only myself, but all my team members. Interesting thing is about what evolved as time went on. Not only did we get better leverage, but I only did a couple of things in real estate, because Diane went on to becoming regional director, owner of offices and whatever. I ran a team. It was never a big team. It was 4 or 5 agents, 2 admin people. But I haven't negotiated an offer for 25 years. I haven't worked with a buyer for 25 years. I listed properties and lead generate and lead follow up. That's all I did. And I hired smart people to work with us. And it allowed me to free up, have a very tight schedule that I wasn't a 24/7 realtor that was just on call all the time.
Yeah. I mean, really, this conversation has been amazing, and I genuinely believe that there's something here for everyone. Our closing question, I just want to know, and your wife not included, who has been the biggest influence of your life?
My life. I can't answer that as one person. There's been several mentors along the way that have guided or helped direct, and surrounding yourself with people that know more and understand more about what's going on in the world. You can never know enough, and having those people, and right now, whether it's our lawyer or our accountant, close friends that are in business, it's a conglomerate of people along the way that have helped us get that leg up. I mentioned earlier about Mike Ferry and Howard Britton. Those guys were really crucial to us in the late 80s. So I can't say there was one person.
Okay.
Believe it or not, Donald Trump was an inspiration to me a while back. It's crazy to say that, but he was an inspiration to me on a few books I read of his. I mean, it's just different people at different times.
Okay, so now I need to understand why.
Well, I told you about 1989, 1990, and going through all that, he was a big real estate investor and whatever, and just hearing what he's got to say and how he says it, and what he does. And it was very interesting. Didn't follow his model, but I like the backbone he had.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what I really believe in. People are able to call a spade a spade. I'm not a fluffy guy. I'm a pretty simple guy, but I like to call a spade a spade.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the beauties of podcasts, actually. I listen to a lot of them, is there's so many different teachers out there who are willing to share their experiences, and there's something to be gained, by selecting who inspires you. I'm an avid learner, and I like to hear the experience of other people to take it that nugget of wisdom or something that's just going to help you to get a little bit more focused, to remind yourself of what's really most important, to not only have the most successful business is only one piece of it, but we say it all the time, but the life by design, the most successful life. It's not doing everything at the highest level or really well. It's doing the most important things at the highest level and really well, and executing with that, what I'm hearing from you, that laser focus, that precision, and consistency over time. So I am really thankful and grateful that you joined us today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your stories and all the wisdom that you've shared with us. I hope that this has been really great for those of you that have joined in live today, and all of those that will listen in the days and months and years to come. I just want to remind everyone that you are listening to The Curious Investor today with Nicole Tanner. And you can find us on all the different podcast channels. So please don't forget to like, share, follow, join us on our Facebook page at Reed James Commercial Real Estate. We would love to stay in touch with you and share even more information. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.